The wind howled across the frozen surface of Arcturus 7 like a hungry beast. Inside his small research station, Marcus Chen sat before a wall of flickering monitors, watching ice crystals form patterns on the reinforced windows. He'd been alone on this moon for 3 years now, and that's exactly how he wanted it. The former Marine sergeant sipped his coffee and checked the atmospheric readings. Another storm was coming. A big one. He'd seen plenty of blizzards on this ice world, but the sensors showed this one would be different. Temperatures would drop to lethal levels even for his reinforced habitat. Marcus began the shutdown protocol for his external equipment when something caught his eye. 3 heat signatures were moving across the ice fields, heading straight toward his station. At first, he thought the sensors were malfunctioning. Nothing could survive out there in this storm. No human, no known animal, nothing. He switched to the external cameras, but the swirling snow made visibility almost zero. The signatures grew closer. Whatever they were massive. Each one registered as large as a cargo transport vehicle. Marcus's hand instinctively moved to the plasma rifle mounted beside his desk. Old habits from the war never really died. The proximity alarm blared. Something was at his main airlock. Through the camera feed, Marcus saw movement in the white chaos. Then a shape emerged from the blizzard that made him freeze in disbelief. It looked like a dragon from ancient Earth legends, but real. Its body was covered in scales that seemed to be made of blue-white crystal, and it stood nearly 4 meters tall, even in its weakened state. Behind it, 2 more of the creatures collapsed onto the landing platform. The first creature turned its massive head toward the camera. Its eyes glowed with a soft amber light. Then it did something Marcus never expected. It lowered its head to the ground in what could only be described as a bow, a gesture of supplication, a plea for help. Marcus stared at the screen. Every regulation, every protocol screamed at him to stay sealed inside and report this to Colonial Command. Unknown alien species making contact should be handled by diplomats and scientists, not by a washed-up veteran hiding on a frozen rock at the edge of human space. But then he saw it. The smallest of the 3 creatures, barely larger than a horse, was shaking violently. Its crystalline scales were turning dark, like frost-covered glass losing its light. It was dying. Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd made a promise to himself after leaving the Marines. Never again would he watch someone die when he could do something about it, even if that someone wasn't human. He grabbed his thermal suit and medical kit, then overrode the safety locks on the airlock. The moment the door opened, the Arctic wind slammed into him like a physical blow. The temperature readout on his suit's display showed -70 degrees, and dropping. The largest creature lifted its head as Marcus approached. Up close, it was even more magnificent and terrifying. Its breath came out in clouds of vapor that sparkled with tiny ice crystals. But there was intelligence in those amber eyes, and desperation. Marcus pointed at the open airlock and gestured for them to enter. The creature's eyes widened. Somehow he knew it understood. It made a sound, a deep harmonic frequency that Marcus felt in his chest rather than heard with his ears. The other 2 creatures stirred, and together they crawled toward the station. Getting them inside was chaos. The airlock wasn't designed for creatures this large, but somehow they folded their bodies and squeezed through. Marcus sealed the door behind them and cranked the heat to maximum. In the main bay, the 3 aliens lay on the floor, their bodies steaming as they began to thaw. Marcus approached with his medical scanner, not knowing if it would even work on their alien biology. The readings were bizarre, but showed critical distress. Their respiratory systems were failing, not from the cold, but from something in the atmosphere itself. The largest creature lifted one massive clawed hand and touched the comm panel on the wall. Suddenly, sound filled the room, harmonic frequencies that shifted and changed. Marcus's translation software kicked in, struggling to make sense of the alien language. Words began forming on his display screen, fragmented but clear enough. "Thank you, human. We flee death. Chose your kind, heard stories humans help, even enemies." Marcus stood there, looking at 3 dying aliens who'd traveled across space to ask him for mercy. He thought about his past, about the choices he'd made, about why he'd really come to this frozen moon. He knelt beside the smallest one and opened his medical kit. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's get you three stabilized. Then you're going to tell me who you're running from." Marcus worked through the night, running every test his medical equipment could manage on alien biology he'd never seen before. The translation software had improved, turning the creature's harmonic sounds into words he could understand. The largest one, who identified herself as Cryasa, explained their species was called the Valith. The atmospheric poisoning came from trace elements in Arcturus 7's air, compounds that were harmless to humans but toxic to Valith respiratory systems. Marcus jury-rigged air filters using components from his environmental suits, creating makeshift breathing masks for each of them. It wasn't pretty, but within hours, their crystalline scales began glowing brighter again. The youngest one, named Seth, was the first to recover enough to move around. Despite being the size of a small vehicle, Seth moved with surprising grace, careful not to knock over equipment in the cramped station. The young Valith watched Marcus with constant curiosity, those amber eyes following his every movement. By the second day, Cryasa was strong enough to tell their story. She spoke through harmonic frequencies that vibrated the air itself, while Marcus's computer translated the words onto his screen. What he learned made his blood run cold. The Valith homeworld had been rich in rare minerals that the Galactic Concordance wanted. When the Valith refused to surrender their sovereignty, the Concordance declared them a dangerous species. They called the Valith predators and monsters, convincing other alien races that extermination was necessary for galactic safety. In reality, it was genocide dressed up as peacekeeping. Billions of Valith had died. Only scattered groups survived, fleeing to the far edges of known space. Cryos's group had crashed on Arcturus 7 after their damaged ship failed during a hyperspace jump. They detected Marcus's station and made a desperate choice. "We heard stories about humans," Cryos explained, her voice creating ripples in Marcus's coffee cup. "Other refugees speak of your kind in whispers. They say humans are strange, that you show mercy to enemies, that you fight for those weaker than yourselves, even when it makes no sense." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Not all of us. We've done plenty of terrible things, too." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Cryos's words. In his mind, he saw another time, another place, a colony world where he'd been ordered to fire on a building that intelligence said held enemy combatants. He'd followed orders. The building had actually been full of civilians. That memory was why he'd come to this frozen moon, to escape what he'd done. On the third day, Seth started helping around the station. The young Valith had been watching Marcus repair a power coupling and suddenly reached out with one delicate claw. Despite their size, Seth's talons could manipulate tiny components with incredible precision. Within minutes, they completed a repair that would have taken Marcus an hour. Marcus found himself smiling for the first time in months. "You're a natural engineer, kid." Seth's scales brightened with what Marcus recognized as pleasure. Even across species, some emotions were universal. The third Valith, an older male named Tor, spent most of his time near the windows, watching the ice storms with sad eyes. Cryasa explained that Tor had lost his entire family in the Concordance attacks. He'd stopped speaking months ago. Marcus understood that kind of pain. He sat beside Tor one evening, saying nothing, just sharing the silence. After an hour, Tor made a low harmonic sound, not words, just acknowledgement. It was enough. On the fourth morning, Marcus went to check his supply drone. It had returned from its automated run to the nearest depot station. As he downloaded the supplies manifest, his blood turned to ice. The drone's communication log showed an automatic upload to the Concordance tracking network. His hands shook as he pulled up the bounty listings. There was a massive reward for any information leading to the capture or elimination of Valith refugees. The listing was only 3 days old. His drone had already transmitted his location and the thermal signatures it had detected near his station. Marcus ran calculations on his display. A Concordance hunter fleet could reach Arcturus 7 in 4 days, maybe less if they pushed their engines hard. The bounty was large enough that hunters would come running. He walked back into the main bay where his 3 guests rested. Seth was carefully organizing toolkits, trying to be helpful. Kryasa was teaching Tor some kind of meditation technique. They looked peaceful for the first time since arriving. Marcus had a choice to make. He could ask them to leave, to take their chances in the wilderness. His duty to colonial regulations said that's exactly what he should do. It would be the smart choice, the safe choice. But as he watched Seth carefully place each tool in perfect order, Marcus realized he'd already made his decision. He'd failed people once by following orders without question. He wouldn't fail again. He began pulling up blueprints of his station's defensive systems on his computer. If hunters were coming, he'd be ready. Marcus gathered the 3 Valeth in the main bay and showed them the tracking data. Kryos' scales dimmed when she saw the bounty listing and the transmitted coordinates. She turned to Marcus, her harmonic voice heavy with sorrow. "We must leave immediately. We have brought danger to you, and you have already given us more kindness than we deserved. We will take our chances in the ice fields." Marcus shook his head firmly. "You're still too weak. That storm system outside would kill you in hours, and your ship can't fly. If you leave now, you die. Simple as that." "Then you will die with us if you let us stay," Kryasa said. "The hunters will come with ships and weapons. You are one human with a research station." Marcus pulled up a schematic of his station on the main display. "I'm one human with a research station who spent 12 years as a marine combat engineer. There's a difference." He pointed to various locations on the map. "This station has power generators, communications arrays, and a whole lot of equipment that can be repurposed. I've defended worse positions with less." Seth moved closer, examining the blueprints with fascination. The young Valeth made a questioning sound and pointed to the station's northern wall with one claw. "Yeah, that's the weak point," Marcus agreed. "We'll reinforce it first." Over the next 3 days, Marcus worked like a man possessed. He showed the Valeth how to weld reinforced plates onto the exterior walls. Their claws and strength made quick work of tasks that would have taken him weeks. Seth proved especially talented, understanding structural engineering instinctively. Marcus converted atmospheric processors into electromagnetic pulse generators. He rigged the station's mining explosives into proximity charges and buried them in the ice around the perimeter. Every external camera became a targeting sensor. His small research station was transforming into a fortress. On the second day of preparations, Kryasa approached Marcus while he was programming defensive protocols. She sat beside him, her massive form somehow gentle despite its size. "Why do you do this, Marcus-chun? You owe us nothing. We are strangers to you." Marcus stopped typing and stared at his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then the words came out, words he'd never spoken to anyone. 5 years ago, I was following orders on a colony world. Intelligence said a building held enemy fighters. I called in the strike. Turns out it was a school. 43 children died because I didn't question my orders. His voice cracked. I came to this frozen rock to hide from that. But hiding doesn't fix anything. Kryos's harmonics softened to something almost like a song. You carry pain for those you could not save, so you fight now for those you can. This is why the story is about humans speak truth. That evening, Marcus sent an encrypted message to his old commanding officer, Admiral Patricia Okonkwo. He didn't ask for help. He knew military support would never arrive in time. And besides, this was an authorized operation. But he wanted someone to know the truth. He documented everything about the Valeth, their genocide, and what the Concordance was really doing. "If I don't make it," he recorded, "let people know the Valeth aren't monsters. They're refugees who deserve better than what the galaxy gave them." On the 3rd day, Kryasa did something unexpected. She called Marcus to the center of the bay where all 3 Valeth waited. Their scales were glowing with a soft light that pulsed in rhythm. "There is something we must share with you," Kryasa said. "A gift and a burden. Our people have an ancient ability, a way to connect minds across species. It allows perfect understanding and coordination, but it requires absolute trust. We wish to offer this to you." Marcus looked at the 3 aliens who had stumbled into his life just days ago. "What does it involve?" "We open our minds to you and you to us. Our thoughts, memories, fears, all shared. For our people, it is reserved for family bonds. We offer it now because you fight for us as family would. Tor, who hadn't spoken since arriving, finally made a sound. His harmonics translated simply, "Brother." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He nodded. "Tell me what to do." The three Valeth formed a circle around him. They pressed their clawed hands together and began creating a harmonic frequency that made the air shimmer. Cryasa gently touched Marcus's forehead with one crystalline claw. The world exploded into sensation. Marcus felt their thoughts flow into his. Centuries of Valeth history, the beauty of their lost homeworld, the terror of running and hiding. But he also felt their hope, their determination to survive, and their gratitude for his kindness. When the connection settled, Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his three companions with new understanding. They weren't just aliens anymore. They were family. His computer beeped an alert. The Hunter fleet had just entered the system. They had 6 hours. Marcus smiled grimly. "All right, family. Let's show them what mistake they made." The Hunter ships appeared in orbit like vultures circling prey. Marcus watched them on his sensors. 5 vessels heavily armed, carrying mixed crews from species loyal to the Concordance. Through his shared connection with the Valeth, he could feel Cryasa's fear and Seth's trembling anxiety. Even Tor's usually calm presence rippled with old trauma. "Stay calm," Marcus said aloud, knowing they could feel his determination through their bond. "We planned for this." A communication request flashed on his screen. Marcus accepted it, and an insectoid face appeared, a Kresh hunter with multiple black eyes and clicking mandibles. "Human researcher, we have detected Valeth criminals in your location. Surrender them immediately, and you will be compensated with 50,000 credits and safe transport off this world. Resist, and you will be eliminated as an accomplice to fugitives." Marcus leaned back in his chair, projecting a calm he didn't entirely feel. "I've got 3 refugees who asked for shelter during a blizzard. That's not a crime where I come from." The Kresh's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Refugees? These are dangerous predators responsible for attacks on Concordance vessels. Your ignorance excuses you. Stand aside." "Here's the thing," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "I've got 3 people who needed help, and I've got a door. You want them, you come through me first." The communication cut off abruptly. 2 minutes later, the first landing craft launched from the Hunter ships. Marcus activated his defenses. The landing craft approached cautiously, scanning for weapons. They found a small research station on an ice moon, seemingly harmless. The first craft touched down 200 meters from the station. 12 hunters emerged, a mix of Kresh and amphibious Torgal soldiers. They advanced across the ice in standard military formation. Marcus waited until they reached the buried charges. The ice field erupted in a series of explosions. 3 hunters went down immediately. The others scattered, firing energy weapons toward the station. The blast hit Marcus's reinforced walls and dissipated against the shielding he'd installed. "First line down," Marcus muttered, switching to the electromagnetic pulse generators. A wave of energy rolled across the ice, and half the hunters' weapons sparked and died. The remaining hunters retreated in confusion. Through his neural link with the Valeth, Marcus coordinated their movements like a single organism. Cryasa positioned herself at the north wall, where sensors showed the hunters regrouping. Seth covered the eastern approach with those precise talons ready to operate defensive systems. Tor stood at the southern entrance, finally ready to fight again. The second wave came harder, for landing craft this time, dropping 40 hunters in coordinated positions. They brought heavier weapons, plasma cannons that could crack through reinforced walls. Marcus felt sweat drip down his back as the station shook from impacts. "Cryasa, redirect that blast," Marcus shouted, seeing a plasma charge incoming on the north side. The large Valeth moved to the wall and pressed her crystalline scales against the metal. The plasma bolt hit, and somehow the energy flowed through her scales and dispersed harmlessly into the ground. Marcus felt her pain through their connection, but also her determination. "How did you—" Marcus started. "Our scales evolved to handle extreme temperatures," Cryasa explained, her voice strained. "We can redirect energy for short periods." But it hurts. The hunters realized conventional weapons weren't working. They switched tactics, using cutting torches to breach the eastern wall. Seth moved to intercept, but there were too many entry points. Marcus grabbed his plasma rifle and moved to support the young Valith. Then disaster struck. A hunter with a shoulder-mounted launcher fired at Seth from close range. Marcus screamed a warning through their link, but it was too late. The blast caught Seth directly in the chest. The young Valith's crystalline scales cracked with sound like breaking glass. Seth collapsed, golden fluid leaking from the wounds. Through their neural connection, Marcus felt Seth's pain as if it were his own. The young one who'd so carefully organized his tools, who'd learned to help prepare the station, was dying. Something broke inside Marcus. Not fear, but fury. The same protective rage he'd felt for his Marines in combat, multiplied by the intimate connection he now shared with the Valith. He moved without thinking, putting himself between the hunters and Seth's fallen form. But something else was happening. Cryos's body began glowing with brilliant light. Her scales shifted from blue-white to blazing gold. The temperature in the room dropped dramatically as she absorbed energy from everything around her. "Get down!" she commanded through harmonics that shook the walls. Marcus hit the floor, covering Seth's body with his own. Cryosa released the stored energy in a pulse that swept through the station. Every hunter within 50 meters collapsed, their weapons fused and useless, their armor systems overloaded. In the sudden silence, Marcus looked up at Cryosa in shock. What was that? Her scales were dimming back to normal, and she swayed with exhaustion. An ability my people hide. The reason the Concordance truly fears us. We are not just refugees, Marcus. We are survivors of an ancient power. Outside, the remaining hunters were retreating to their ships, reporting frantically to their commanders. They hadn't expected this. Nobody had. Marcus cradled Seth's head in his lap, while Cryosa worked frantically to seal the cracks in the young Valith's scales. The golden fluid had stopped leaking, but Seth's breathing came in shallow, painful gasps. Through their neural link, Marcus felt the young one's life force flickering like a candle in the wind. "Stay with us, kid," Marcus whispered. "You've got so much left to see." Outside, the hunters were regrouping. Marcus's sensors showed they were preparing for a final assault. The remaining hunter ships in orbit were powering up weapons to simply blast the station from space. They'd stopped caring about taking the Valith alive. Now it was about eliminating the problem and the troublesome human who'd made them look foolish. Marcus checked his ammunition. 3 magazines left for his rifle. The EMP generators were burned out. Most of the proximity charges had been used. He'd bought time, but not enough. They'd lost. Tor moved beside him and placed a gentle claw on Marcus's shoulder. The old Valith's harmonics were soft. "You gave us something we thought lost forever. Dignity. The chance to stand and fight rather than just run and hide. For that, we are grateful. We're not done yet," Marcus said, though he knew it was hollow bravado. Then his long-range sensors exploded with activity. A massive hyperspace rupture was forming directly above the station. Marcus's heart sank. He thought the Concordance was bringing in a battleship to finish them, but the signatures were wrong. These weren't Concordance vessels. Ships began emerging from hyperspace. Human ships, military destroyers, civilian freighters, mining vessels, even a luxury transport that had no business in a combat zone. Dozens of them, all broadcasting human identification codes. Leading them was a massive dreadnought that Marcus recognized immediately, the UHNS Resolute, flagship of Admiral Patricia Okonkwo. His communication console lit up with an incoming message. A dark-skinned woman in a naval uniform appeared on screen, and Marcus felt his throat tighten. Admiral Okonkwo looked exactly as he remembered, stern, professional, and absolutely fearless. "Sergeant Chun," she said with a slight smile. "I got your message. Thought you might need some backup." "Admiral, this is an authorized operation. You could face court-martial. Let me worry about that. Right now, we need to have a conversation with these hunters." She switched to a broadcast on all frequencies. Her voice carried the weight of Earth's entire military behind it. Attention Concordance vessels. This is Admiral Patricia Okonkwo of the United Human Navy. The individuals in that station are now under official protection of Earth and her colonies. Any hostile action against them will be considered an act of war. The hunter ships in orbit went silent. Marcus watched their engine signatures on his sensors. They were calculating, weighing options. The Concordants had heard stories about human military capabilities. Nobody wanted to test those stories firsthand. The Kresh commander's face appeared on the shared channel. Admiral, you are interfering with legitimate Concordance law enforcement. These Valith are wanted criminals. These Valith are refugees from genocide. Okonkwo interrupted sharply. I've reviewed Sergeant Chen's documentation. What the Concordance calls law enforcement, we call systematic extermination. Humanity doesn't recognize your authority here. You would start a war over 3 aliens? Okonkwo's expression hardened. We're not starting anything, but we're finishing it. Leave now or find out exactly why humans have the reputation we do. For 30 seconds, nobody moved. Then, one by one, the hunter ships began powering down weapons and turning away. They jumped to hyperspace within minutes, leaving only the human fleet in orbit. Marcus slumped against the wall, the adrenaline finally draining from his body. Through their Neuralink, he felt Cryos's overwhelming relief and Tor's quiet joy. Even Seth's presence brightened slightly. The next hours were chaos. Human medical teams rushed down to stabilize Seth, bringing equipment that could actually work with Valid biology. Admiral Okonkwo herself landed at the station, walking through the battle-scarred corridors with the air of someone inspecting conquered territory. She found Marcus sitting beside Seth's medical pod, holding the young Valita's claw. The Admiral pulled up a chair and sat beside him, without speaking for a long moment. You know this changes everything, she finally said. Word is spreading already. Other refugee species are hearing that humanity granted asylum to the Valith. They're going to come here, Marcus, looking for the same protection. Marcus looked at the 3 Valith who'd stumbled into his life and changed everything. Good. Let them come. Over the following weeks, more ships arrived. Not hunters this time, but refugees. Species Marcus had never heard of, all fleeing Concordance persecution. His small research station became a hub, embassy station. They started calling it a place where the hunted could find shelter. Seth recovered slowly but surely, the young Valita's scales healing stronger than before. The moment Seth could walk again, the youngster returned to organizing tools and helping with repairs, now teaching newly arrived refugees the same skills. Cryasa worked with human diplomats, sharing knowledge her people had hidden for centuries. The ancient power her species possessed wasn't just offensive. It was information. The Valith had once been keepers of galactic history, including warnings about something sleeping in the galaxy's core, something that was beginning to wake up. The Concordance doesn't want to eliminate us just for our resources, Cryasa explained to Marcus one evening. They want to eliminate anyone who remembers the old threat, anyone who might rally resistance when it returns. Marcus stood at the window of his station, no longer alone, no longer hiding. Outside, ships from a dozen species orbited the frozen moon. Inside, refugees worked together to build something new. Admiral Okonkwo had returned to Earth, but she left a permanent human presence. You're not just running a research station anymore, Sergeant, she told him before leaving. You're running humanity's first real embassy to the greater galaxy. Don't screw it up. To approach Marcus, the old Valith who'd finally found his voice again. You came here to hide from your past, but instead, you created a future none of us expected. Marcus smiled, watching Seth teach a small reptilian refugee how to repair a power coupling. Funny how that works out. Outside, another ship appeared in orbit. More refugees seeking shelter. Marcus's console beeped with an incoming message. He accepted it, ready to say the words that had become his purpose. Welcome to Embassy Station. You're safe here.